first, a short introduction to sustainability in general. The second is I want to do a short update on the climate change, because I think these 2 points are sort of related to the reason why we are interested in this topic at all, energy in the ICT. And then I will talk about the environmental sustainability of information and communication technology in general, ICT in general, and then more specifically about environmental sustainability of digital education. So those are the 4 points. So let me start with from the general point with the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we look at these 17 goals, I'm sure you have seen them before. You can see that there are a number of them which are related to digital education in some way. It's number 4 is about quality of education, that could be related. Number 7 is about affordable and clean energy, so we need energy for ICT. We have infrastructure, number 9, so we need an infrastructure for the ICT as well. And of course, you could say that this infrastructure is part of sustainable cities and communities. And of course, also climate action is an important part of the relation here to the lecture today. So out of these 17 goals, it is possible to order them in a specific way here. So some are related to the biosphere, some are more related to the society, and some are related to economy. So this is another view of the goals and how we can divide them into what they are related to, so to say. Yes, and of course, beneath each of these goals, there are a number of targets to be met. And you can find those targets on the web if you're interested, but I'm not going to go into those today. So that was the first part, just as an introduction to my lecture. The second part of my introduction is about an update to the climate change. And we all know that the temperatures are rising, and this is the graph covering the years from 1860 and up to now, or in 2022, I think. And as you can see, the temperatures are not only increasing, they are increasing more and more rapidly over time here. So, and we can see that in the global mean temperature has risen already about 1.3 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. But in Europe, it has already risen by 2.3 degrees, so much more than the global average. And if we go to the north of Europe or up into the Arctic, the increase is even higher, so up to 3.3 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. So the temperature rise is severe, and it's going faster and faster. And this last year has been quite extraordinary. So in April 2024, we had 11 consecutive warmest months globally. So each month of the last 11 months had been warmer than any of the months before, of the same months before. So this is quite an extraordinary period we're in now, and we cannot really explain why this increase is going so much faster than before. And I showed you the graph of the air temperatures, and this is a graph of the sea surface temperatures. And here it's even more alarming, I would say. You can see that each of the curves here are representing 1 year from January to December. So there is a natural variation over a year, of course. And we can see that 2015, towards the end of the year, the temperatures in the sea were extraordinary that year. And that continued into 2016. So those years, 2015, 2016, were extraordinary at that time. But since about March or April last year, 2023, the temperatures have deviated more and more, you could say, from any records, any previous year. And it's not just by a small number, it's quite a large increase compared to the variations we have seen before. And this is still not explained in any way. Yes, and of course, this has resulted in a lot of disasters. We have seen heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and floodings. And these headings here are just headings from newspapers, which I took during last year. And it's not only some parts of the world, it's all over the world this is happening. And of course, we do now know why this happens. This graph is showing the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere during the last 400,000 years. And we can see that the variation has been between about 180 ppm and up to maybe 300 ppm for all of these 400,000 years. But then around 1950, something happened. The CO2 concentrations increased very rapidly. And in this diagram, you can see that it goes almost straight up. And this diagram was made in 2013. So you can see that the curve ends here at about 400 ppm. And then only 10 years later, the concentration is 420. So this rise is really alarming. And of course, this is connected to the temperature increases that we see. So what do we do about it? Of course, we are trying to arrange international agreements, and the most important one is the Paris Agreement, since which was ratified in 2015. And the question is then, how are we doing with this Paris Agreement and its effect? Well, if we look at the energy use, or energy consumption rather, by source, this is what it looks like over time since 1965 to 2022, the last statistics that we have. And we can see, not surprisingly, that the energy use is increasing quite rapidly, and it's gone from somewhere around 40,000 terawatt hours in 1965 to 160,000 terawatt hours or so in 2022. So a steady increase. And in the graph here, you can see what are the sources of the energy. So we have oil at the bottom, we have coal, and we have gas. So the three fossil fuels are the three lowest parts of the diagram here. And what is disturbing here is that we have not been able to break the curve. We are still, the amount of energy we get from fossil sources is still increasing, even though it's not increasing a lot anymore, but it's still increasing actually. And the amount of renewable energy which we use or start using, it is not quite enough to cover for the increase in energy use in society. So we have a lot of work to do to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement. And if you look at when have different countries in the world promised to be carbon neutral, and most countries have aimed for 2050 as a year when they should be carbon neutral. And if you would put 2050 in the graph here, it would be somewhere to the right here in the graph. And to be carbon neutral, that means that we should not use any fossil fuels anymore. So we would have to have a very steep decline of the use of fossil fuels to be able to reach the goals which we have promised, all the countries have promised in conjunction to the Paris Agreement. So this is a problem for us, and we really need to consider how we could help to reduce the use of energy and thereby the use of fossil fuels. Just to put some numbers into this, so the table here shows how much energy we consume from different sources, and if we calculate the percentages here, we can see that the renewables are only 14%, while the nuclear is 4% and the fossil fuels are 82%. So even if we would, that's what's decided in the last agreement, that we should increase the amount of nuclear power by factor 3. That would not make a big difference. We cannot depend on the nuclear power as a way to solve the problem with the fossil fuels. We have to decrease the fossil fuels.